What's up, everybody? Once again, it is I, James, coming to you from the Nerdy Mewzings Podcast studio. I am joined today by inker extraordinaire, Mr. John Livesay. How you doing today, John?
Hey, good. Just living.
Yeah. Awesome, man.
Yeah.
Did I say your last name right?
Yeah. No, that was good. I know it's that is the one constant thing I get whenever I do conventions or appearances or whatever. Yeah, it's always a name, but it's good.
People probably try to pronounce it like it looks, right? Like Livesay, or do people over pronounce it?
Yeah, that was basically my whole existence going
Whole
through
life.
grade school with most of them.
You've been inking some of the work of my friend Josh Durstein.
Yep.
See,
Yep.
I messed his up too. That's what I did. It's
Yeah.
Durstein. It is Durstein, like Frankenstein, but I always say Durstein.
I had not heard that phrasing of it yet. So yeah.
Yes. He was like, we even talked about it before we started, and I still messed it up.
I have a page. I have a page of his right on my desk right here. I was working on last night and a little bit this morning. So I'm slowly. It's a lot of stuff on it, so I'm slowly chipping away at it. But
yeah, on Amarok, right? That's his Kickstarter, and man, that kid's evolved a lot. Like I know he's redoing a lot of the pages because he wasn't happy looking back, and now he's going in and
I mean, it's good. I'll give him credit for him being so young and so good / talented for his age. He's very good about just not. I think that's might be one of the issues with a lot of the social media stuff, and everybody can instantly get attention or gratification or praise or bad praise or whatever.
Right.
But he's been good. He hasn't gotten an ego yet, which I think is probably common with a lot of people without posting everything all the time and getting a lot of likes or comments or
definitely.
He's good about taking. I've only had to bring up twice, like, hey, maybe we need to fix this or redraw us. And he already knows. I was like, do I really have to? I was like, no, I know.
Right.
So he's been good about it. Yeah. So he's definitely good about listening and adapting and learning really quickly. So
that's awesome. Now, did he reach out to you when he was starting to put that project together, looking for an inker, or did you guys kind of already have a little line of communication going?
It was a couple years ago, and he had been posting stuff, and I think I just liked a lot of the things, and he maybe wrote me something, and I wrote him back, and he wanted me to ink something, and I only had one request. I was like, hey, if I do this piece, I want you to mail it to me. I just want to ink right on the board. I just really ink it on blue lines, which is the norm and it has been for a long time with inking any of the companies or just people in general, because everyone doesn't live by each other and nobody wants to pay postage. I was like, look, if you send me the piece, I'll totally do it. So that was more of an incentive for me, because just inking on the blue line, it's just, I don't know, I'm just not that into it.
Not the same feel, huh?
It is not.
You don't get any trepidation going over the original pencils or anything. You've been doing this for so long now.
I'd rather you get a better energy, and you can. I think the biggest issue is you can see everything. So, like, if you're doing these blue lines, you get the file and you print it out, and it's just light blue against bright white. So, and you can generally see most of this stuff, but some of the stuff is harder to make out if they're not penciling super crisp or clean, or if they never clean the glass on their scanners. Because it'll pick up every molecule you do on there, and it'll all get converted. And sometimes it's really hazy. Like, you get a page and you can see the stuff, but there's this blue mist everywhere, and trying to decipher everything, it just takes longer. But when you get the real boards, it's just gray on white, and it's a breeze. So
now you've been inking professionally since 1993. So you were You've been back since like the image days and
Yep.
all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, basically right after they started. So I didn't get in the image for a while, which I was so bummed. I was just, because
That
that
was
was the
it.
thing. Yeah, that
Yeah,
was the
that
thing. I
was
mean, there
totally
was
it.
it's been rare. There's been any other exciting moment in comics, and
Yeah.
that just you know they turned on the switch and boom, like everybody was just ready to go. And I was trying. I just sending stuff in and calling Wildstorm all the time and
Mhm.
Extreme, and I finally started working for Extreme and sometime in '96. I don't remember if it was the beginning or middle of '96, but I was
Right.
doing stuff for them.
So Fraga and all those
Yeah,
guys.
I know the Boom and all the other guys. Yep.
The boom is booked to be on here soon.
Oh, awesome.
He was one of my first people that I invited to be on here.
Good.
Yeah, we connected, gosh, probably back in 93, 93
Mhm.
or 94. The comic shop I worked for here in Washington State, it was called Spider's Web Carden Comics, and it
Mhm.
was co-owned by Todd McFarlane with his
Oh yeah,
brother-in-law.
I remember seeing those ads and stuff. Yeah, I
Yeah,
remember, and that's where
so
Todd was selling all his artwork through and everything.
it
Yeah, yeah, I
was
remember that stuff. Yeah.
it was insane to work there because
Mhm.
that's where he stored all his originals.
Yep.
And so I'd go back in the storage room and pull down a gigantic brown paper bag and go through all his amazing Spider-Man and Hulk and
I
old Infinity Inc. stuff and
I
everything.
thought I remember there was a catalog that got sent out to buy art from them.
There
I thought I
probably
remember.
was. Yeah, I
Yeah, I
think
think
they were.
because I was still a big art collector back
Yeah.
then, so I already had a lot of originals, and I was getting because that's all you would get. You would get like the little fold in half Xerox booklets of
Yep.
everything, and then you had as a scramble because you had to call to get the page,
Yes.
depending who got the mail first,
Yep.
or even buying pages out of the classifieds of Comics Buyer's Guide. Like I remember every
Yeah.
Friday running home from the bus, getting dropped off, and trying to get to the mailbox and see what. But
Such a different
stuff
world
would
back
get
then.
scooped up right away. Or I heard a story that guys were paying to get those issues FedExed,
Mm.
priority, and they would get them on Thursdays.
Oh
And so a
man.
lot of the stuff would just get scooped up right. And also, I was a little kid, so I barely had any money. So me getting pages
Yeah.
I did get pages, but it was a miracle. But everything was insanely cheap back then.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, they used to give me a page every birthday when I
Oh
was
my
working there.
God. Do you still have them?
I have two. Yeah, I have a gigantic splash page from Infinity Inc. So like
Mhm.
his old
Yep.
stuff at DC, and then I have a Hulk page.
Oh, awesome. What
Has
issue is
Rick
it
it,
from?
it has Rick Jones on it, so it's not a Hulk's not on the
What?
page, but it's
What
still
issue is it
awesome.
from?
It's one of his early. It was one of the first ones he did. It was
Oh, okay.
before he was inking himself on there.
Oh, okay. I don't remember. Was it
It's in the
Wyatt?
320. Yeah, I think it was Wyachek or something was inking him
Probably.
on it, or Bob McLeod maybe.
Yeah, I haven't looked at those issues, and so I have
Yeah,
them, but I haven't looked. So he started on 330.
yeah. So it had to
So.
be like 331,
Okay.
332, somewhere in
Hey,
there.
that's still pretty cool. I don't have any
Yeah,
McFarlane pages, because even back then they were still pricey.
yeah,
So
yeah. And the Infinity Ink page, he wasn't inking himself on that
no,
either, but
no.
you could still see some
Yeah,
McFarlaneisms
you
in
can
there.
see the McFarlane hands and
He
the
had on the splash page, there's a guy with his hand like that and
yeah.
everything. So you're like, oh, that's
Hmm.
that's the seeds of what we would be
Yep.
getting. Yeah, and it has a vellum overlay on it with some corrections. So
Yep.
it's just cool as somebody
Yeah.
who's always been an aspiring artist and to actually see the pages.
Oh, it's a
It's
big help. Yeah.
it's a huge help, right?
I didn't know when I when I bought my first page of artwork, I did get it from the Classifieds of Comics Buyer's Guide, and I got a page. I was a big way in the Kevin McGuire when
Oh
because
yeah.
right when Justice League came out, like
Yep.
that book was so good and it was funny and it was such he came out of nowhere. That was his
Yeah.
first I think it was his first gig and that style was so different.
He did all the like crazy facial
Yeah, it
expressions
was
and
just so
stuff.
good and that book was just a serious book that had just random funny stuff in it. And
Yep.
I got a nice Guy Gardner Mr. Miracle page, but when I got
Nice.
it, that was the first time I ever saw that they were drawing that
They were
size.
drawn big, yeah.
Yeah, I had no idea, and I had just started drawing. I just started actually drawing like the end of my 10th grade,
Okay.
and I think I got that page sometime in 11th grade. So it did. It's just funny. You see these little things, and it just opens your eyes. Like, oh,
Yeah.
all right. And then you measure everything out.
Yeah. And for me, like realizing that they make mistakes too.
Oh
And
yeah, it's always funny.
seeing whiteout and seeing
Yeah,
corrections.
it's hilarious. Like when I get people that come up to me at shows, like, "What do you do if you mess up?" And I was like, I know that happens probably to everybody every single day. And I go,
Yeah.
that's why. What was it? The dude from the Monkees, his mother invented whiteout.
Yeah.
Was it? Yeah, I go.
I think
That's why she
so,
invented
yeah.
whiteout. Yeah. So
Exactly.
they're everywhere. But it's funny. Then you'll see, like, I look at pages all the time. Every time I go to shows, that's my thing. I always want to look at the originals and see how people are doing lines and this and
Yes.
that. But you look, especially the old pages, there's a lot of stuff they just don't fix. Like there's a lot of like mistakes and stuff going
Yeah.
outside the borders, and they just, whatever, who cares? And
Yeah, working at the shop provided me access to being able to see that stuff for the
yeah,
first time, and then it got it, where I could meet some of the creators because they would bring Todd in for
yeah,
signings, and they would bring I don't know what comic convention it was here, because I don't think Emerald City Comic Con was around way back then, but there was some con they brought in Fraga and Stephen Platt and Greg
yep.
Capullo all came in, and I got to be their quote unquote bodyguard because I was
That's
always
funny.
been a martial arts guy. So they're like, you sit with them, if anybody gets out of line, you're there. So
I
Fraga and
just
I really hit it off and kind of maintained a somewhat of a
mhm.
connection over the years and everything.
Yeah, I've been friends with Dan forever, so we still chat
Yeah.
once in a while, and it's not the same since we don't live by each other anymore like we did in California. But I still talk to him kind of regularly.
Yeah.
And I just talked to Platt at the New York show this past weekend, so I was over chatting with him for a while. And the previous show last October, I hadn't seen him for, I don't think I'd seen him for 6 years, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, you're here." So we had, we were chatting for a long time and catching up. So now we text here and there and talk and stuff.
Didn't he get into storyboarding?
Yeah, he left to do like storyboarding for like music
Yeah.
videos and film. He has a lot of design for film stuff, and he does a
Just
lot of
like Dan, that's what Dan does a lot of too.
yeah. Dan does a ton of that stuff, and he directs a lot of animated stuff, and he does storyboarding for movies. So yeah, all those guys, most of them left
Yeah.
after like it. Usually when the big money was slowing down and stopping, they all just got up and left.
Yeah, when the image boom kind of
Yep.
slowed down. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Dan and we kind of had lost touch over the years. And then the first year, well, the only year I got to go to San Diego Comic Con was back
Mm-hmm.
in 2016.
Yeah.
That was his first time coming back to a con.
Oh, okay.
So I ran into him there and we reconnected and everything. And it was really cool. Yeah. And Platt, I think it's just been within the last like couple of years, he started
Yeah.
doing more comic stuff and getting back to going to
He's been
cons and things.
doing a pretty decent amount of covers. I know. I think he has a new one coming out this week for Amazing Spider-Man
Yeah.
60. It's that one with the side of the bus or something in New York.
Yeah. His
And
work
then he had the
is,
Moon Knight one last week.
his stuff's really evolved. It's really cool to see. Like all the essence of his style is still there, but
Yeah.
structurally things have changed and evolved, and it's always neat to see the evolution of an artist over the years.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
especially a lot of those guys when they were breaking in, like they weren't necessarily at the level that they were
Mhm.
probably aspiring to be, but they were getting work and getting
Yeah.
in and kind of learning on the job, right?
Yep. It's all you're literally learning while you're doing every page and
Yeah,
getting, you're just getting better. And same thing for me. So you're just
that's
cutting
what
your
I
teeth
was.
as long as you can get in, and then you have to do everything you can to stay in.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to ask you. Firstly, when and where did you first break in? And then was that in line with your experience as far as learning on the job and that
Yeah.
kind of getting mentored and learning through doing?
Yeah. I had never, weirdly enough, where because I still lived in just outside Detroit in Michigan, and there's always been a lot of comic creators that came from Detroit and or Michigan, just a ton of them. And I knew I wanted to work something in comics when I was in middle school. I assumed that I was just going to have my own comic shop.
Okay.
And I already had a really big collection by then, and there was a lot of comic stores in where I lived and over in Detroit. There's a ton of them. And after talking to a few of the guys, I mean, and especially like during the beginning of the '90s where everybody was making a lot of money, everybody just did not seem happy. Like it just
Yeah.
didn't seem like. And then I got the art part, and then I was like, oh, I was writing comics, or I was writing stuff. I had a good friend of mine. He was a good artist when we were in school, and we're doing a thing where it's writing short stories and this and this. And after a while, like he just got. I think I asked for one too many changes,
Oh no.
and he's like, that's it. I'm not doing this anymore.
Gotcha.
He's like, you just draw it, and I was like, oh. Okay. And I just started. That was, I think, around the end of 10th grade, and I just
Okay.
started, which was insane because it'd been nice if I could have started drawing around 4 or 5, like almost anyone else that's working in comics. I could have had all those years of practicing and this and that. So
Yeah. That's kind of the story
yeah.
you always hear from a lot of these artists is that, oh yeah, I've been drawing ever since I can remember. And
Or the one I hear, I've been drawing since I was in the womb.
yeah.
It's like,
Okay, buddy.
yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, look, if you've heard the story about Frazetta, he got offered a scholarship, I think, to go to France,
Yeah.
and he was 3.
Yeah. Yeah. But there's only
Those
so
are the
many
ones.
Frazettas, right?
Yeah, those are the once in a century generational.
Yeah.
It's it that he's got it. So, but I just was practicing and practicing. I just was practicing all the time, and then I decided to go to the Kubert School,
Okay.
which kind of at the time seemed to be the only comic book animation like art focused school. Like I didn't have to worry about doing history or trigonometry or all that other
Yeah.
stuff. So a friend of mine I had met here who had gone to a different school, he was phenomenally good pencil for our age. I was stunned how good he was. I was dreadfully bad. I mean, to the point where you had to submit a little portfolio of like 8 pieces to get in the Kubrick school. And I was like, there's no way I'm getting in. Because he was going to go too, but he was a year under me. So I waited the year. So I just didn't want to go by myself. So I waited the year, and I just was working nonstop to save up money to go. And then I got in, which I was shocked I got in. So, and of course he got in. I mean, his stuff was amazing. So we started, we went and did the thing. And then my part was starting to do inking was I was so slow and just dreadfully bad at penciling. I mean, and I know people think I'm being modest.
Right.
I will guarantee you I was the worst penciler you've ever seen. And I was struggling in those classes. And my friend who was with me, because you'd have 2 classes a day, 5 days a week. So we had 10 classes, and you had homework in every one of them. And so they want to get you used to having that much stuff, to have being used to doing a monthly book.
Try to have a deadline.
Yeah, so you get used to
yeah.
see how much dedication and hard work it is. Or, if you're going to work in an animation studio. And I'd be sitting there sweating bullets every night trying to get these pieces done. And we shared a room because you had to go in like their community housing. So we had this big room we shared. And he just sitting there. He'd get Domino's every night, watching TV. And just the next morning we'd get up, it was at the old building for the school. Joe had bought this very old high school, and it was a massive building. So across the street, there was a deli. He would just go across the street, get a ton of food for breakfast, bring it back, and he would bang out his homework assignment right there and right before class. And it was awesome.
Like it was nothing.
So infuriating because it's a miracle I passed any of the classes. It was. And so I I just was getting too discouraged to see it live. It's different if you see stuff like, oh, look, I did this, but I'm watching him just whip out these
Yeah.
amazing pieces. And I was like, I holding up mine. And I was like, I don't know, what am I doing? And I'll give him credit. He was very nice about giving me pointers. He really was. And so then I decided, I was like, well, we should have a pencil inker team. And so I was starting to ink his stuff. And that's where I saw the light go on. I was getting better, like very consistently quickly. I was getting better like every week. And of course, that's when Scott Williams showed up. They were doing X-Men, and the stuff was just like the greatest stuff ever. So
Phenomenal.
It definitely locked into a lot of people wanting to do that. So
all the stuff with Jim and Wills that he was doing.
It's amazing. Just seeing all that stuff. And I love Wills. I just saw him at the show a couple of days ago, and Wills is just one of my heroes.
He's amazing.
Jim and Scott was there too, and just is incredible.
Just had the opportunity to do one of those comic art boot camp online courses.
Oh yeah, good. I'm doing a ton of stuff with Ryan. I'm working on
Ryan. So I've done one with Ryan, one of his courses, and then I just finished doing one with that Wills instructed. So that was really cool.
Yeah, Ryan's very good at and I just, because we were hanging out the whole time at the New York show a few days ago, and he's doing his
amazing,
instruction thing with people bringing stuff, and he's drawing everything for them, and he's very good at breaking down the process and showing it to you. So I learned a ton both from him and Wills, and like you said, anytime I've gone up to Ryan at a con and described something I was struggling with, or even drew down something as an example, and he's like, oh yeah, just do this he's very good, very good at teaching. Great to see them do it, but it's still that weird thing where you still have to do that now. You watch him,
exactly.
And Ryan's so fast at pencil, and he's all right, you just do it like that, and then you do this, and you're like, all right, like, you got to make sure you can actually do it.
Totally. So learning on the job, I mean, you were at the Kubert School.
Yeah.
From the Kubert School, what was your first big break?
Okay, so I went forever ago, but it's a 3-year course, and I dropped out. I only went a year and a half. It was odd for it being so, we were in a weird time period where Image hadn't started yet when I went. It was gonna happen the following year.
Yeah.
So literally everything was changing at the time. The way we're coloring, the way we're rendering, with ink, we're doing this and doing layouts. Everything was gonna just explode. So weirdly enough, they did not have many inking assignments, which we had one, which I was like, why do we have one? I mean, every page we would do for a comic involves a lot of ink. So I made the decision to drop out, and I did it early enough the second year where I got half my tuition back, which was a big help. And I stayed up there because, we had to stay in the housing. So I stayed up there and just practiced all the time until that year ended. And then, we moved out of the place we were renting and came back here. And I just practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced. I put, not at that point, but, I was trying to put my 10,000 hours in to really get good. And again, being in Detroit, there's always been a few comic book publishers in Detroit. And, whether we had Caliber or something else, there was always guys. There was always a lot of little comic conventions, a lot. It was always the ones I would go to when I was a kid at the Knights of Columbus Hall on Sunday. They'd one every Sunday and stuff. And sometimes they'd have artists there. I can't remember. Was it Caliber? It might have been Caliber. They put out a book called Dead World and The Realm or Arrow or something.
Yeah.
So they would always have Vince Locke and Guy Davis at those little shows. So I would get to see them and talk to them and stuff. But then I started practicing, and then Image started. And that changed everything. And all of a sudden, there was a ton of new publishers. And they were just grabbing anyone that could form a thought and hold a pencil or a pen.
Yeah.
And I was always really good at talking. When I go to conventions, I could talk to any of the artists. I had no fear, and we could talk to stuff. And I knew a ton of history about comics because I was a massive collector, and I knew a ton of stuff, so I could always, you know, get conversations going. And I met a couple artists here, and they were already like Kirk Jarvin was already working for Marvel, and I became friends with him. And he was incredibly helpful, giving me pointers about art and stuff. And I started inking like some of his things for samples. And he had another friend named Dan Lawless who Kirk lived quite further from me, so I wouldn't see him that often at shows, but we talk on the phone all the time. But Dan lived really close to me. He lived like 20 minutes away, so I used to go over and see him. And then he helped me get my first pro job at a company called
nice.
Majestic Comics, and they had a few big guys over there. And Dan, that was back when everybody was doing a lot of trading cards. So Dan had done a 9-piece trading card thing that was like one of those puzzles, like you put together for one big splash page. So that was my first real gig. I got to ink that over him in, I think, the middle of 1993.
Oh, that's awesome.
So that was good. And
then, I just became aware of Dan because he's been doing some YouTube stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, this guy's great. Like I never heard of this guy before, right?
He's very good. So I've known Dan forever, but Dan helped me get my very first pro gig.
That's amazing.
And I didn't get anything for a while after that until like the following spring in 94. I ended up meeting Ken Lashley at a local at the Motor City Con here, and he was doing Excalibur, and I went up to him and showed him my stuff, and he was like, "Yeah, stuff's good." He's like, "You should just be working," and he just called Marvel like that when we got back from the show, and I started inking like Excalibur 82, so it was just oddly just worked out great. And then I ended up getting another gig from that convention. I was supposed to start doing some stuff for Milestone, and my friend who was with me at the Kubrick School, we had gone with a portfolio set of our pieces to try to be like the next penciler inker team. And we're showing to them, and they were thinking of having us. And then there was a guy leaning over our shoulder, looking at our stuff while we're talking to them. And then we ended the talk, and we walk away, and the guy's like, "Hey, come here, I gotta look at that stuff." And we go over to this empty table, and he's looking through our portfolio. And he was the owner of do you remember that role-playing game company, Palladium Books?
Yeah,
they did riffs and everything. So again, it was another Detroit company, and I just really didn't know anything about role-playing game stuff, but they were a big deal at the time, and he loved our stuff, and he just offered us a ton of gigs right there. So we illustrated, they have a bunch of their books that have all the stats and the stuff, all the characters. So we did like two or three of those huge books, and like I remember we did about 140 or 160 spot illos for all the character shots and weapon shots, and so that was nice. So we knew, hey, we can do this. Like it was a great start. So that show, that Motor City Con of I think it was March of 1994, was like the big thing that moved me forward. And then that was it. I just kept rolling. Like it was just nonstop. So I started getting Marvel stuff, and then eventually I did some stuff for Lightning. Lightning Comics was here in Detroit. They were a big deal at the time. I can't remember the character they had, but I was doing stuff for them for a bit.
Awesome. So you just kept the momentum going.
Yeah, I was very
that
fortunate.
Break happened.
Yeah, I was very fortunate because Detroit was such a heavy comic city, and and I just kept rolling. Like I just kept doing stuff and stuff and stuff.
Now, did I know the aspiration was, you were sending a lot of things to Image to try to get in inking there. Did that eventually evolve? Did you get some jobs with Image?
It took a while because, again, right when Image started, that like everybody came out of the woodwork and just wanted to work for like Jim Lee or, Mark Silvestri or, Todd and Rob. And so, I started doing stuff for Rob at Extreme sometime in 96. And again, since they were still in California and I was in Detroit, we still do everything FedEx. So I was doing a pretty good amount of stuff for them. And then I was still doing a lot of Marvel stuff. And I don't remember if I might have been doing a couple other independent things. I was doing member stuff for, I don't remember what that was. It was really popular at the time. I'll remember it later, but I remember it was one of the chicks and with the guns,
Okay.
whatever. But
Yeah.
I was doing
That phase of comics.
yeah. Oh, it's on tip of my tongue too. I can't remember. And I have and they sent me. I have a stack of comps. I mean, they sent me just like. I mean, it's nice getting a lot of comps, but it was like they sent me a box of like 50 copies. I was
You
like,
got to keep them somewhere.
yeah. So and Matt Hawkins was still running like Extreme Studios at the time. He's like, if you just move here, we'll give you way more work. I was like, well, gee whiz, that's great, but that's a big commitment for me to move all the way across the country. And, at that time, there's still a lot of comics, but, the Image, money train was slowing down quite significantly because the sales weren't there and stuff. And so I didn't know what to do. I was still doing stuff. And then I was good friends with Joe Weems, and he was already inking a lot of stuff, and he was at Top Cow, and we were talking stuff. And then, so to lead into that, I had gotten a call from Jim Lee around December, and he's like, "Oh, we want you to come and do the internship program," and And I was like, "That's awesome," but again, I still, because they would put you up in the intern condo.
Right.
And I'd already heard stories like it was just no one takes care of anything. I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. It's a big commitment. But I told him, I was like, hey man, it's a big commitment. Can I call you back like in a day or two? I need to really think about this. And he was like, yeah, all right. And so I was like, screw it. Like I called him back like a day or two later, and I was like, I'm just gonna do it. I gotta do it. I called back. He didn't remember calling me. So
oh man.
I did go, and I was like, I was just irked, and I called up Joe Weems. And I knew his roommate was leaving. And I was like, hey, do you still need a roommate? He's like, yeah. I was like, I'll be out there in 3 weeks. He's like, really? I was like, yep. I just go, whatever, I'll do it. So yeah, I just grabbed a couple things, got a U-Haul. And back then you had to go to AAA, get a map printed out. So
oh yeah.
no GPS, and stuff. So I got there, and within a couple days, I was already helping at Top Cow. I was doing panels on that Devil's Reign crossover where they had like...
Oh, yeah, I remember Devil's Reign.
Elektra and Cyblade. I think I helped in a few of those Dave Finch panels and some other stuff. And then I started instantly... I went from doing like a big chunk of pages each month for Extreme to doing like 2 issues a month. And it was just so overwhelming, but I had to just do it. And, so I was still doing some Top Cow helping here and there, but I was doing Evangeline when like there was a new Evangeline like storyline. So I did that for January, February, and March. And then all that stuff just kind of stopped. And then I just rolled right into Top Cow. I was like one of the last new studio guys that I just already rolled in because I was already like helping so much there. So yeah, it was awesome, and I hear, and Josh has brought up, oh, I wish they still had that studio system. And I hear that from a lot of guys, and it's just I'm very fortunate.
Not how things are set
up.
No,
it just wouldn't happen anymore. But I was very fortunate that I was literally just right there, and I got to work with everybody at Top Cow. I got to ink, a ton of Finch, and so I was, I got to ink a ton of Silvestri and a ton of Michael Turner. That's
what I was going to ask, if you got to work ink any of Michael's stuff.
Yeah, I did. I did a cover. And I did a bunch of character turnarounds he was doing for some animated thing. I don't know. And I did a bunch of those. And then I helped out on the second Witchblade Tomb Raider one shot.
Oh, yeah.
And then Joe and I split inking Fathom 1, 2, and 3.
I just found that Witchblade Tomb Raider in my collection the other day. I was going through one of the long boxes and pulled that one out. I'm like, oh, cool.
Yeah, and it was a big help because we had the condo we were renting, like in the studio section, we had Joe's table, my table, and then we had a table in the middle and a table behind us. So we would work all night long. So everybody came over to work at our place. We had everybody over, like, because then they wouldn't have to worry about driving down pages or mailing pages to us. So like, Turner would stay at our house for a couple of days and, crash in the guest bedroom, and he'd be finished drawing up an issue. Or Finch basically lived at our place because he didn't live far from us, but he lived by himself. So he didn't want to be by himself all the time. So he'd bring his big box of tools. And just be constantly drawing over there. Benitez would be over there all the time. And Brandon Peterson, I think, stayed at our place for a week, finishing an issue of Arcanum. And so it was just easier. They were there like, all right, I'm done with this page. He handed it to Joe. I'm done with this one. He handed it to me. And we just sit there and go. And or Bat would come over, which was a colossally big help for me because I'm sure I was a low man on the totem pole there, because they had Bat,
right,
Joe Weems, D-Tron, and I think Aaron Soud and Jason Gorder were still doing stuff at that time, but I was still literally the bottom guy, so I really had to keep up and get better and not say no when they offered me another thing because I had no sleep. So I was like, all right, let's go, and always not be a problem because everyone was I was always the easiest to like, all right, no, just give it to him. So so it worked out really. I got better really, really, really fast because I had to, or I would have got left in the dust.
Such a once in a lifetime experience.
It was. All that. I was stunned because when I moved out there, I had like $704 in my name. I had no car. And just, I really thought I'd be moving back in a few months. I had no idea if it was going to work out. So, but yeah, shockingly. And I was Joe's roommate for 12 years. Wow. And we put out the output we had for pages was insane. Like we were just pumping out so many pages every year. It was crazy.
Now, talked a little bit earlier, mentioned learning on the job. Obviously this situation was the ultimate perfect storm of getting to learn and getting to see how a lot of different inkers work and just learning through doing. I wanted to talk a little bit about the process because I don't want to assume that the listeners understand exactly what an inker does when it comes to comics. I might ask questions as if I don't know and I'm playing dumb so the audience can hear. But so it's my understanding that the job of an inker is to delineate the pencil line work, to separate background, middle ground, foreground, provide depth, clarity, transitioning from light to dark areas, this type of thing. So could you go into that a little bit more and give me your thoughts on that process and what really makes a great inker, in your opinion?
So you kind of hit most of it right there. So generally everything was inked forever before we had any sort of great technology just to really make crisp scans of just a pencil page. So you needed the ink to get, so you could see everything in the printing process for comic books. And, it would just, as you said, separate everything. We need different textures on stuff to whether, your sweater is going to look different than the brick building you're standing behind or your shiny armor of Captain America's shield next to his chainmail or whatever. So you need to make sure everything looks like it's supposed to. Everything separates well. There's no confusion to the readers. And everything is technically done right, whether you have the wheel of a car or a scaffolding from a building or a parking meter or whatever. So you need to have that really clear separation so the reader is not struggling to figure out what anything is. And everybody has their own way of doing stuff. I render way different, especially nowadays. It's just not the same thing, but everyone renders way different and they throw their lines different, whether they're using a brush or a quill. I use a quill basically for everything. So I have, different ones. I was just talking to somebody at the New York show and he was like shocked that I was using a quill because I can fake the brush look on some things. But it just helped. But then, as everything evolves, the computers got better and a lot of guys could scan the pencils. And also back in the day, these guys, were making no money. So they had the pencil pages very fast. So they were looser. So most of the inkers had to be able to finish those drawings. And, the more pages they pumped out, the more bigger their check would be. And I think nowadays there really isn't that anymore because everybody's pencils are so pristinely tight It's why a lot of guys would get their pencils just scanned now and colored.
Yeah.
And but yeah, there isn't that need for that. Or a lot of the inkers nowadays would be terrified if they change one molecule on the page, because you never know. You haven't had that interesting conversation when you feel the wrath of a penciler, because why would you do that? I've only had a couple of those, but I was like, hey, just flipping out because like
had to make a decision, buddy. You didn't leave me enough information.
You would think so, but yeah,
doesn't always work that way. Huh?
There was one time I was witness to, it wasn't something I inked. Joe had inked something, and they finished the book, looked gorgeous. I mean, it looked so good. And then later on, the penciler brought back these pages. He Xeroxed the pages and took a pen and circled these little tiny minute things like, I don't know why you did this, and this was wrong. And I'm staring.
Wow.
I mean, it was, I mean, I'm critical, but even I was like, man, that's like really rough. Yeah, I was like, whatever.
Yeah.
But it wasn't me. But you've had those conversations here and there. So,
well, it's got to be hard because the penciler probably has a vision in their head of how
course,
they,
it's harder,
of how they imagine that might look finished, and then if you're having to make a executive decision on something in the moment while you're getting a page done, I could see where that might come up here and there. But I also think I was going to say, I also think that a good penciler is going to give room for the inker to shine through as well. I think that's here and there, maybe in certain team ups.
Sometimes. But yeah, it's just, it's supposed to be a team effort. And most of the time it's good, but once in a while it's not.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you're having to navigate not only doing your best to interpret it, but also appeasing the person who you're working with, right?
The inker is always in a weird spot, because you're literally, do I make the penciler happy to make sure I stay in the book, or do I make the editor happy to make sure I stay in the book? And it's tough balance, man, because a lot of times we have no time, and then they're shocked. I was like, well, I don't know, this line isn't perfect. I was like, yeah. I had an hour to ink this panel. Like, what do all the time is gone, and we always, the inker, the colorist, the letterer, they get shortchanged constantly. Like, there's no time. There was some book I worked on that was so late, and I had to go to the printer that day, and I got the last couple pages. I'd ink every page in an hour. And then like afterwards, well, I don't know, I don't think that was your best stuff. I was like, well, that's what you wanted. You guys can't manage time. What am I doing?
It's it's like that meme with the client expectation and the amount of time, and it's like this beautiful drawing, and then it turns into a stick figure. The client's budget versus
the reason. I think, if I remember right, one of the reasons Joe and I were splitting Fathom at the beginning, because Mike was really fast. For as much detail as it is, very fast penciler. But every time he finished an issue, he would go on a trip, whether he went surfing or snowboarding. He'd be gone for a while, and then he would come back refreshed and bang out the next issue of whatever. But we would have no time to ink it, and we're like, it had to be perfect. And we're doing, like, there's so much detail and stuff. So you got used. That's my thing. Like, I like doing a lot of detail more than anybody. So I've had people like, I don't know if you're gonna be able to handle this much detail. It's like, okay, all right, let's calm down here. I mean, it's okay. So it definitely did help. Like, I remember I did Darkness 11 over Mark, and that was the big comeback issue, and it was like the biggest selling issue of the year that year. And they waited till the last minute to pencil it. It was so behind, and somehow they let it get out in the studio that it was the biggest selling issue, so there was gonna be a ton of royalties. And everybody was climbing over each other to get any pages to get that extra cash. And somehow I ended up inking half the issue. I don't know how.
Wow.
I wasn't supposed to probably ink any of it, but I just stayed up. I remember I stayed up for about 51 hours straight just inking. And I took a 20-minute nap in my studio, because I know if I went upstairs in my bed, I would have never gotten up. So I laid down on the studio floor, and I told Joe, I was like, just wake up in 30 minutes. If I don't get up, just kick me right in the stomach, because I know I will. I was so tired, but I was like, all right. It just, so that was one of my big luck out moments. Like, I got my name on that cover. That, I think that was a big turning point for me, because I was like, everybody bought that issue. So it was a big, and I got to ink Mark, which again,
Oh yeah,
I shouldn't have. I wasn't ready, but you got to tear that Band-Aid off and just do it. And that was a big, big help for me.
Well, speaking of liking to ink detailed stuff, Josh throws like thousands of lines. I was thinking about that when I was looking at his pencils. I'm like, he really had to find a inker that matched up well with it, because he's kind of bringing back that kind of 90s, heavily rendered type of work.
Yeah, he's definitely really, really, really like Stephen Platt.
Yes.
And he's not drawing like Stephen, but there's the amount of level of lines.
Yes.
I think it's funny because once in a while, I think the other week I was inking this X-Men page, and it was just taking a while. I don't know. And my wife, like, you're really not done with that page yet? I was like, I'm trying. What do you want me to do? I was like, it's just a lot of stuff here, and you can't phone it in.
Right.
So, the Josh stuff is going well. It's like I said, I have the boards, so it's way smoother. Like, if I had the blue line stuff, I would just, if he would have insisted on me blue line, I would just said no. I would just said good luck, and
yeah,
I hope it does great. But like, it's just way easier. So like, I've done a lot of pieces over him. Like, I think I have it's page 12 on my desk. I was doing a chunk of the guy's cape last night, and then I was doing a little bit of it this morning. So it's. Once I get in a good flow, I'm shocked how quickly, once I can get my wrist moving, or if I've got a good quill, I can just go. Even last night, I was just getting this cape down. All the lines are coming out nice and slick and sharp and just flowing. So, and it did help. I cleaned out my ink bottle yesterday. So
there you go.
Once anyone that inks, if you don't know, use a glass jar. Don't use a plastic jar. Use a glass jar and just clean it out. Dump out that old ink and clean it out like every quarter, like 3-4 times a year, because it'll clump up and get yucky at the bottom, and and then yesterday I was like, yeah, flowing, it's just coming off the quill, no problem.
You're making me think of, like, when you talk about little tips like that. I know it's not the same thing, but it's kind of within that realm. Like, you hear all these stories of like Terry Austin, like his secret, like, way he would cut his nibs and crazy stuff to get the lines he was doing. Have you ever gone to that extent with your stuff? Do you have little tricks that you use to get certain line quality?
I used to, a long time ago when I was living with Joe. We were doing a thing to make the nibs last, because there was this weird time period where the Hunt brand of nibs, I don't know if they were being cheap, but like, they were snapping nonstop. Like, Top Cow bought this big batch of nibs, and they give us a whole pile of them. And like, after a few strokes, it just keeps snapping.
Yeah.
So, we used to do a thing where I was always very good about conserving my nibs. So I would have one nib for hair, another one for holding lines. I'd have another one for rocks. Like when I did the Flash with Howard Porter, I had one super sturdy, tough as nails nib, and I used that for doing every single rock for the 22 or 23 issues I did over Howard in the Flash. So I had a consistent look for any Central City rubble.
Right.
But what we would do, if you wanted to get them clean again, we would take a razor and just shave each side of the quill, blow off all the dust. Most of the time they were good to go. Sometimes, if it's a dead nib, it's a dead nib. Just throw it out.
Right.
But I used to save all my worn out quills for, doing these big, chunky, thick, just blunt points. They weren't crisp and sharp, like if you were throwing it out. So I'd have these big, nice and blunt things. So another good trick, I'm shocked no one's really heard this before. If you got an ink jar and your ink is getting kind of lumpy, it's not, you need to, some guys will put water in there to break it up. Just put a few drops of Windex in there. Like 3 drops of Windex, stir it up, give it a good stir. It might need one more drop. It should be good. It'll start flowing again. It's like, if you just, like, if you're on a budget, you can't toss out the ink, like, and you just, or you're just don't have time to clean the jar because you're on a deadline. Just put a few drops of Windex in there, give it a good stir. should be good to go.
Reminds me of My Big Fat Greek Wedding. The dad wanted to use Windex to fix
Yeah.
everything.
I heard
pro
that
pro
forever.
tip.
I heard that trick, man, forever ago. I'm just, whenever like I randomly ring them, no one's heard of it, but it
That's
works.
awesome. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, you mentioned briefly about finishing, like
Mhm.
how when pencilers are trying to get a lot of pages
Yep.
done and maybe things are getting very loose, or they're just,
Yep.
I mean, sometimes you see like some of John Buscema's old stuff literally looks
Mhm.
like just gesture drawings, like
Or
very, very
John Romita
loose.
Jr. just does breakdowns, and he always has.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So is that daunting at first, and then as you get into the groove,
um,
and the other thing is the artist like very precious about that stuff, or do they understand that they're
yeah, at
giving you
that point, if
something
they're
to
if
be
they're a
very
legit pro,
interpretive?
at that point, they have to understand. You can't. It'd be insane if like, well, I don't know, this is what I was going for. I was like, man, you have 4 different lines for your arm. I was like, you have to
Yeah.
just go for it, and pick the right decision. And yeah, I think that's a lost art, is finishing. I just don't think a lot of the guys are doing it anymore. I can do it well. I probably can't do it as well as the old timers, because that's all they were doing. That's how John was so fast, and Kirby was so
Yeah.
fast, and John Meter Jr. It's a perfect example. He's just breakdowns. I inked one cover over him. It wasn't super rough, but it was still loose. So I just finished. Out of any of the image guys, Joe Benitez was the loosest penciler out of any of them. I was scared to ink that stuff because he would just go right to the board, no layouts. He just, and there would be just lines everywhere and smears and all this other stuff, coffee stains, and I just finished a Batman piece over him a couple weeks ago. I had posted on my social media, and
Yeah, I saw that.
it was probably a 10-15 minute convention sketch. It was as loose as can be.
Yeah.
But I luckily I'd inked a lot of Benitez stuff when I was at the Cow. And even back then, that was the only time I turned down pages. Like, they wanted me to start helping on Weapon Zero. And I was like, no. And
Oh
like, they
yeah, I
looked at like,
remember. I remember Weapon Zero. Yeah.
they're like, what? I was like, no, thank you. And they're like, no, it wasn't an option. You're doing these. And it was like, again, another just, you just have to do it. But man, it was tough, because everything was the great thing about Joe, he's such a good penciler. He's happy as long as it looks cool. And I would hear from other inkers like, oh, I can do this well and this well. And I think the barometer, and this is just me, if you're gonna be, or you tell yourself you're a really good inker, if you can ink a Joe Benitez page well, and he actually likes it, then you can have that title. But
Yeah, there
man,
you go.
it's rough. But he's
Yeah.
so good and so loose and energetic. But I did help after a while. I did get the hang of it. But man, it was just those first big batch of pages I got were just, man, it was daunting. And I was like, oh, here, ink him on darkness. And I was like, no,
Oh
I don't
man.
want it. I was like, no. And so it was. It took me a long time to get the stiffness out. It took me a
Yeah.
bunch of issues. But again, I'm glad they forced me to do it, because I did say no a couple of times and they just weren't going to have that answer.
Now, do you find that finishing and going, working over a lot of different great pencilers and things, did you find that helped your understanding of art develop, and you gained because you're being hard on yourself and saying, what a horrible penciler you were back in the day and all of that?
I guarantee you, dude, I am not being modest. One of these days, if I can drum up some courage, I will post some of the pieces. I know I still have my portfolio I sent to the Cure School. I telling you,
Okay.
I was the worst. And
So
look, modesty is not a thing with anything else I have. I will tell you right now, I was the worst penciler, and I was stunned that they took me. Probably because I paid for the tuition in full.
right.
Whatever, it was. But again, it did help. Yes, I've worked over, oh man, maybe 130, 150 different pencilers in my career. And yeah, it definitely helps. And especially if you get to work over a guy for a long time, like
Yeah.
Howard Porter. I worked over him for years. I probably did 800 pages over him. And the same thing with the great Pat Olaf. Pat's amazing. And I probably did, again, 700 pages over him. And you do get to pick up subtle things here, and that does help you. And it does help a lot. So, but
do you ever pick up the pencil anymore? You do a little bit just for fun?
So I will say Ryan Benjamin has been incredibly gracious about really trying to force me to pencil again. And he is very insistent, and he's been bringing it up all the time. Nice. And he's got this massive faith in me, which is very encouraging. But, you know, during the whole time I was inking full time for forever. And just, you know, you're inking like for 8 hours a day or 10 or 15 or 18 hours. Like, you know, the last thing I wanted to do was pencil and or some more, like, you know, you wanted to get a few hours of sleep, and then heaven forbid once in a while you wanted to go out to the movies or, you know, or, you know, go on a date or do anything. And it just like, man, and they're like, oh, I can't believe you weren't penciling the whole time you were inking. I was like, dude, I was doing like hundreds and hundreds of pages every year.
Yeah.
And, you know, you never want, the thing that sucked, like, you never want to say no to an editor unless it is absolutely necessary, because the only thing they remember is the no. They never remember when you help them out.
Yeah. So never remember the probably hundreds of times you've, like you were saying, you've done a page in an hour or something.
Yeah. Every email is like, oh my God, if it wasn't for you, we never would have got this book finished. But yeah, then you're burnt out. But Ryan has brought it up many times this year about me doing it. And
nice.
I want to. It's just, I'm lucky. I'm very busy. So I've been more thinking about it this year because he keeps telling me, he's like, I can help you. You can do this. No big deal. And I was like,
yeah,
I get it's not a big deal, but it is a big deal.
Yeah.
So I told him next year I will start doing something, and I'll even take his course like you did. I know I'll do it, but again,
well, let me know when you are, because I'll pop on that one too.
No, God, just please. I know. Look, I know you don't believe me. I know you don't. You think I'm being very humble and honest. No.
Well, I think now, after working over all these hundreds of people, you might surprise yourself.
Let's hope so. I really, it'd be great. My daughter draws nicely. You know, she's 7 and she's been drawing for a few years, and she has her way. She will not listen to one thing I say, so I stop saying stuff. But she has her style, and she likes drawing the Art Adams way, where everyone is very long.
Yeah,
but she'll just sit there and just bang out a figure, and I was like, great. And I never say anything, and she just is not interested in hearing anything Daddy wants.
Funny how that works.
I know. She's like, I know, Daddy. It's fine. Just I'm drawing. I was like, all right, whatever.
Well, the last thing I wanted to ask you before we wrap things up is, I know you're an avid collector as well.
Yes.
And I want to know, I already see some of I can get an idea of the type of stuff you like by, like, I see that. Is that the Steranko Captain America back there?
That's that rare Foom poster. I bought that. I bought that in the Mid-Ohio Con in 1995. And the guy we just got done talking to all the editors and stuff. And my friend and I were leaving. We walked to the dealer's room, and the guy had every one of the posters.
Wow.
I'd never seen him in person before. And I was like, oh man. And I had no money on me. And I think I had $60. And the guy had every one of those. That's still the original frame he had it in. And he had all of them. And I was like, oh man, he's got the Cap one. And I love Steranko, one of my favorite guys. Cap's one of my favorite characters. And I was like, I got to get this. And he had the Dr. Doom one with his hand out, which I desperately wanted that one too. Love that one. But I had to get the Cap one. So, I got it. And that Cap behind me right there is from some old Marvel mail-in portfolio, I think from the late 70s, and it's made like the paper's basically disintegrating them. So I have it taped on the wall. Yeah, I like basically everything. I don't have a lot of some stuff, but I have too much of everything else. So I haven't bought anything. I have not bought anything in a really long time because I was fortunate enough to stock up on everything when I was a kid and in high school and just after, and everything was very, very, very affordable. Even great books and keys and all the stuff you can get for nothing. And I had a job since I was in 7th grade, and just everything went to buying comics. So, I go to the con all the time, buying this and buying that. It would have been nice to have some sort of guidance or on a couple things. There's a couple things I should have, like, all right, I didn't need the entire run of this. I could have put all that money into buying, like, stocking up on Golden Age Captain America's,
right,
or this, but I have a great collection. I'm very fortunate, and I was always very good about keeping everything in good shape. Always was.
I saw your Submariner #1.
Yeah, I got that. Yeah. I think for $20, and it is sharp. I haven't seen anything to get graded in long time, but I got a stack. If I would send anything in, I don't know. I'm a little leery about sending stuff in now after the whole.
I'm the same way, man. It
like everything all of a sudden is a 9.8, and everything is this, and everything is that, and they're like, oh well, was it the other year they had that scandal where now these were not graded properly, or this was so?
Well, and then you see a lot of things like with the bent books, like where they're jammed in the case weird, and the book is like actually bent and stuff.
Oh, I haven't seen that. No.
Yeah, it's like I don't know if they're just receiving so much stuff they're getting in a hurry.
I don't know. I did have one neat thing right when CGC started forever ago. I think I was still inking the Flash over Howard Porter, and those guys, they come up to me, oh hey, we learned that, and they just graded a bunch of books for me just for me to pump up the site, and it was cool. So it was neat seeing. So they took a couple Flash issues of mine and graded them. So it was neat to see on the banner at the top of the grading case, like, cover by John Livesay. So it was. That was pretty neat. I will say it's one of the things I thought was pretty cool at the time. But
yeah, my trepidation with it is more so the mailing them off, because that's oh man, I don't know how much I trust the postal system.
Yeah, so generally all the handful of times I had done it forever ago, I would just have brought them to a con, or
because they used to do the on-site grading a lot more than they do now. Now they do that on certain cons. They have the on-site,
but isn't that more expensive?
I think so.
Yeah. So I handed off a few bundles back in the day, and then I had a dealer friend of mine. I would just give them to him because he was submitting stuff like every month. So I just did that. So yeah, I lucked out. I got some really high grades, like that Cap issue. I have a 9.6 on that 111.
That's crazy.
And I bought that. I think I bought that like in 1991.
Yeah,
92. I got there for $25.
That's crazy, because that one, the cover is always because it's a white cover too.
Yep, and I got a 9.6 on that. So, and there was a shop here over, if anyone's from the Detroit area, it was over on 11 and Harper called Comic Tech, and it was a new shop. But I go in there once in a while, and they would have a dude come in once or twice a year and just bring a box of books, and they're all primo, overly high grade bronze and Silver Age stuff, because he needed rent for the year, and he'd bring in like a half box for a box, and I would go in there and they just have all the stuff in the case, like, look at all this stuff, and I bought as much as I could, and they had Ghost Riders, and I bought the Marvel Spotlight 5 and 6, and all the other books I'd submitted, I think I got my Cap 111 from there too. But any of the books I got from there that I submitted to CGC, they all came back as 9.4 and 9.6s.
Wow.
And I had that Marvel Spotlight 5 for a while. And a dealer buddy of mine was bugging me forever to sell it to him. And at the time, Ghost Rider is still super hot. So I think he gave me like a crazy amount of credit. Like, it was a lot. And I like, all right. you never know. I was like, oh, gee whiz, that's a good idea. I don't have to pay for comics for 2 years, and that'll help me, because I'm
Yeah.
still getting work here and there. So I should have kept the dumb thing. I could have sent it in. If I got a 9.6 in that book, that's like what, like a $45,000 book,
Yeah,
So,
easily.
oh man, but yeah, I still have, I lucked out getting a lot of this stuff. So, just right place, right time. And, I should have bought certain things, shouldn't have bought a lot of other stuff, but whatever,
Woulda, shoulda, coulda.
yeah, it's the same thing. And I still, I
Yeah.
still buying art back then was great. I got a great art collection. So I haven't bought anything in a while, but I very happy with what I have. So I lucked out that I've got some good stuff.
Yeah, I lucked out and got a lot of the Invincible pages by Ryan
Oh, cool.
Ottley when they were still affordable before
Cool.
the cartoon
Nice.
and everything.
I just saw him at the con a couple days ago as well.
Yeah, Ryan's awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, yeah. Well, listen, John, I appreciate you being
Yeah.
on here with me today, and I want to give you an opportunity to let everyone know where they can follow you on social media
Mhm.
and keep track of what you're working on and just show their support. So why don't you let everybody know where they can find you? I think your main one is on your Instagram. Is that
Yeah, I
correct?
just have Twitter and Instagram. That's it. So I believe my Instagram is Livesay.inks.
Yep, that's
Yeah,
correct.
Livesay.inks on Instagram. And my Twitter is, I don't call it X, I still call it Twitter.
Yeah, I know. Same.
That is the number one. So one John Livesay. So it's pretty easy. So yeah, I usually on Twitter I will post a comic from my collection, and I'll put up random inking videos and
Awesome.
finished pieces and stuff. So
Well, I'm going to make sure to put that in the show description for everybody so they can find you.
awesome.
I am going to hit the outro here in a moment, and I want to encourage everybody to keep it nerdy. Until next time, take care, guys.
All right, thank you. Bye.
You.